way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him, keeping their distance. They called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Naaman was a powerful man. He was an accomplished warrior, and he had thousands of men at his command. His victories in service to the country of Aram made him one of the king's favorite military leaders. Although he won many battles in his lifetime, there was one battle that Naaman was losing: the battle against leprosy. He suffered from the skin disease for perhaps longer than he cared to remember. He came face to face with his enemies on the battlefield hundreds of times, and each time he overcame them by something that he could only describe as beyond himself. But those enemies were easily seen and easily dealt with. How could he face an invisible enemy that was slowly corrupting his flesh? Disease has always been a part of the human experience. Despite our great medical advances in recent centuries, our bodies are ultimately subject to corruption by both time and infection. A recent article in NPR called "Has the Human Lifespan Hit the Ceiling?" says that the absolute maximum human lifespan may be as high as 125 years old. However, that is as far as disease control will take us. The human race has its limits, and despite our best efforts, we are powerless to resist the steady currents of disease and time. Even a tough guy warrior like Naaman could not resist disease, and he probably felt powerless as the leprosy spread slowly over his entire body. Now, we don't know what kind of help Naaman had from the Aramean priests and healers. They would probably have offered sacrifices to appease the god that harassed Naaman. They might have applied herbal salves and uttered incantations to fend off evil spirits. Perhaps they would even have prescribed that he go and bathe in a nearby pool or river, so that the offending spirits would be washed down the stream. If he received any help, he probably did so very discreetly. He probably also chose his clothes carefully and applied cosmetics to conceal his growing skin disease until he couldn't hide it any longer. After all, if his men discovered that their commander suffered from leprosy, it might shake their confidence in him and undermine their image of him as a strong and successful warrior. He may have been powerless over his disease, but at least he had some power over his image. When I consider this, I'm reminded of a World War II veteran that I met out in Naperville. One day I received a call from a local retirement home. A man had just moved in and his son had requested a pastoral visit. As it turns out, this man's girlfriend had just died. He was heartbroken, but he refused to speak about this with anyone, even his own son. The staff and the family contacted me thinking that he might be willing to speak with a pastor. He was powerless to control the sorrow that welled up within him as we talked. But he soon turned the conversation around to my young age in a display of inner strength and distance. After all, he was a 91-year-old war veteran from one of the greatest wars ever fought. Men from his generation didn't show weakness, not even to those they loved. He may have been powerless over his broken heart, but at least he had power over his image. Now, Naaman could only keep his leprosy hidden for so long. Eventually, his wife and their household servants began to notice. One day, Naaman's wife was discussing his skin condition with her servant girl. This girl had grown up in the kingdom of Israel. And she mentioned to Naaman's wife that there was a prophet in the capital city of Samaria who might be able to cure him. Naaman couldn't keep his leprosy hidden any longer, and a low-profile healing in a foreign country might be his best chance at saving face in front of his men. So Naaman's wife encouraged him to seek out this prophet in Samaria. Naaman got permission from his king, and he set out to seek the prophet in the king of Israel's court. However, the prophet was not at the court. In fact, the prophet was not even a member of the king's court. And the king of Israel panicked. After all, the request was that he heal one of Aram's greatest generals. And if he couldn't do that, heal one of the Arabian king's most highly decorated military officials, the whole incident might become propaganda for a war. Naaman's visit turned into a PR nightmare, and news of his visit and how the king reacted quickly spread throughout the Samaritan marketplace. Once more, Naaman was facing an invisible enemy. Only this time, it was corrupting his image. It's difficult to change a story once it has taken hold in someone's mind. Take Mahatma Gandhi, for example. Now, most of us know Gandhi as an icon for peace and justice. But this past week, there were a few professors at the University of Ghana in West Africa who have demanded that a statue of Gandhi that was erected on their campus in the spring be taken down, because to them, Gandhi is an icon of hypocrisy and racial discrimination. Merrick Kennedy recently wrote an article about this controversy, which erupted in September. Last June, the President of India had given the statue of Gandhi as a gift to the University of Ghana. The professors began protesting the statue, demanding its removal immediately after it was installed. Now, Gandhi is recognized around the world for his nonviolent advocacy for Indian rights. But many remain unaware that he was, as the professors stated in their petition, uncharitable in his attitude towards the black race. In an effort to minimize the consequences of this controversy, Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement acknowledging Gandhi's flaws and urging the world to remember that people evolve. They end by lifting him up as an inspiration for civil rights and freedom across the world. Unfortunately, the damage to Gandhi's image was done, and the statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was powerless to reverse what had been said. Likewise, the damage to Naaman's image was irreversible as word spread throughout the Samaritan marketplace. And news of his visit to the king reached the ears of the prophet Elisha by word of mouth. Elisha immediately sent a message to the king, inviting Naaman to come over. Yet when Naaman arrived, he sent him a prescription through a messenger, without even bothering to leave his home. Naaman was understandably outraged. After all, the priests at home could have done this for him, and it probably wouldn't have turned into the public spectacle it turned into in the city of Samaria. But at the urging of yet another servant, Naaman followed the prophet's prescription and took 7 baths in the waters of the river Jordan in Israel. Amazingly, he was cured, and his skin appeared fresh and youthful. He returned to the prophet rejoicing and saying, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel." Whatever God or spirit had bound Naaman was powerless before the God who healed him in Israel. Healing came through Naaman's weakness. He discovered the power of God only when he accepted that he was powerless to cure his disease or to preserve his image. As God tells St. Paul in 2 Corinthians, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness." When the World War II vet released the tight grip he had on his image, even for a brief moment, he was no longer alone with his pain. In the statement issued by Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for a brief moment, we saw how even an imperfect human being can inspire change across the world. God's grace is sufficient for us, and God's power is made perfect in weakness. In Christ, God accepted human limitations and bound himself to our weakness. He bore our diseases. He accepted a rebel's death, and he revitalized our relationship with God and with one another. God's strength was his weakness. God's power was his powerlessness. God raised him to new life, a life that you and I share through faith. We are powerless to deliver the world from disease and death. We are even powerless to truly be the change in the world that we wish to see. Only when we accept our own limitations and acknowledge our own weakness will we see the power of God at work in the world and for the world. We all have limits in our lives. Everyone is bound by something. When we accept those limits, like Naaman, we will discover God at work. Through our weakness, God will bring healing. For it is in weakness that Christ is known.